Welcome to the Vision by Protiviti interview. I'm Joe Kornik, Director of Brand Publishing and Editor-in-Chief of Vision by Protiviti, our content initiative where we look into the future to examine the strategic implications of big topics that will impact the C-suite and executive boardrooms worldwide. In this, our first topic, the future of cities, we're exploring the evolution urban areas are undergoing post-COVID and how those changes will alter cities over the next decade and beyond. And today, we're focusing in on successful smart cities and specifically the role of public-private partnership in that success. We've got a great panel for you today. I'm joined by Peggy James, Dean College of Social Sciences and Professional Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Parkside, Michael Pegues, the CIO of the City of Aurora, Illinois, and William Martin, the CIO of the City of Racine, Wisconsin. Peggy, Michael, and William, thanks so much for being here today. You've all talked a lot about the significance of the public-private partnership and its role in the success of cities, both today and in the future. And I know you all have perspectives on that topic, so let's open up with a question for all of you about that public-private partnership and the role that relationship plays in the future of smart cities. Why is it so important to get that right? Why is it so important that we get that public-private partnership right for the future of cities?
Well, if I could start, Joe, first of all, thank you for having us. I think this is a really important discussion, and I appreciate the fact that you've also allowed folks from outside city government to participate. I'd like to start off by at least making an observation that 3/4 of the folks living in the United States right now are living in small and mid-sized cities. And in Wisconsin, the fastest growing cities that we had in 2020, when double-digit growth, were all cities with less than 50,000 people. So suffice it to say that smaller communities are revitalizing downtown areas. They're developing commercial ventures on non-revenue producing property. They're repairing roads, and they're looking into using smart technology to improve transportation, improve healthcare, and actually improve utility provision across the board. Although these developments are really good for property values and increased revenues, our smaller communities simply don't have the funds to leverage these projects at the outset. And they can't afford to make mistakes. A partnership, and I need to make sure that we understand this is a long-term dynamic relationship rather than a simple contract for services, allows the city to actually share some risk, share some revenue, and also, and from my point of view, share responsibility to the community. For us, it's the last one that's important. Economic development and quality of life become a shared public, private, and community concern in this kind of a partnership and has the potential to increase transparency, reduce equity gaps, and meet community needs more than a one-sided development would do. The university is one of those agents that can actually help to connect the community with both the private and public sectors to inform the partnership and to provide assessment of the value creation for the community.
Will, do you have any thoughts on that first question?
No, I think Peggy did a great job of really summarizing kind of the landscape that we're in. As someone who represents a city that is under 100,000 in population, and something like 98% of all American municipalities are that size or smaller, we really are not in a situation where we're ever going to have all of the human talent, all the ability to research and think about the forward opportunities. And financially, we just aren't ever going to be in a position to do this all alone. And so for all those reasons and so much more, it is not just a value added to have public-private partnerships, it's essential that we could not possibly begin and sustain the transformation towards smarter city status without having the private sector, the higher education, and others at the table with us. And that's what really makes this an exciting opportunity and allows us to really grow in a sustainable way.
And Michael.
Yeah, and just a caveat on what Peggy has said and Will, and I totally agree. I mean, just with all of the things that have happened here over the last year and actually beyond that, municipalities themselves, we need to look at how we redefine standards, whether that's public safety, city services, inclusive internet access, and just being innovative in, economic development and attracting new businesses to the city of Aurora. It's like, I get it, and I've been here at working for the city for about the last 4 years, um, and the city's job is to have good streets, have good sidewalks, to get the water bill paid, and things like that. Those are the services that the residents come to expect, and the budgets are predefined according to those drivers. But now, as we go into this fourth industrial revolution, when we start to look at cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, right? Um, Infrastructure modernization, next generation technology. I mean, these are all different technologies that need to be used to kind of advance us forward. The citizens really don't care about that. And even, more importantly, they don't understand it, right? So how do we make that, transparent to the constituents so they see the values, they see the outcomes, they see the impact without all of the technology jargon, behind it? Because those are just the underpinning foundation to help us to kind of push it forward. Looking at this, it's that municipalities aren't in a position to drive innovation. That's the bottom line. I mean, I've worked in the private sector, I've worked in the Department of Defense, and I've worked in a municipality now. We don't do a good job at it, right? We do a good job at sidewalk, street, cutting tree branches, and things of that nature, right? That's why we have to partner with the universities and, more importantly, with the businesses, that the private sector, who they know how to get the best bang for their buck and get that ROI, right? They know how to model these services and these solutions, right? And going back to what Will said, actually, about, I'm going to call it the human talent, or the people, the personnel. Government just does not incentivize and or attract the right talent to drive innovation. I mean, we need to come to a realization, government means bureaucracy. Innovation is the opposite of that, and the quicker we understand that and we figure out models, to basically manage that forward, the better off we're going to be. And I personally think unequivocally that that's in public-private partnerships.
Right, a key part, obviously, of this. Will, I know Racine was awarded a North American Smart City designation, and is the only city with a population under 100,000, I believe, to receive that award, which is quite impressive feat. So talk to me a little bit about what made that possible and what it does for the city of Racine moving forward.
Well, no, thank you very much. And we are so excited about the fact that we were able to win that designation, in part working with folks like Dean James and University of Wisconsin-Parkside, bringing together the technical college, the four-year university, private sector partners as well from the for-profit business sector, and having government there. Bringing all that together, we really were able, even though we're the smallest ever, we brought together a coalition that was extraordinarily large, knowing that, again, we just didn't have the resources in the 360 to be able to think through all the implications of policy, of the technology, of confidentiality. There's just so many different aspects, and having such a small organization, this allowed us the force multiplier of having those public-private partnerships to get together and actually do a better job of moving forward as a group. The other piece of this, though, I would say equally importantly, is our willingness to reimagine ourselves. Racine is a place that has long been defined by what we made here. And now, as a post-industrial city, we're really reimagining ourselves as to how do we create, through asset mapping and other thinking, but what do we have? What do we have to offer? What differentiates us? And I think these are the processes that any city of any size really needs to think through as they're considering their public-private partnerships and how they might achieve such designations.
Right. And Michael, Aurora is a little bit bigger than Racine. I think it's a little more than 200,000. Can you discuss the work you've done around attracting companies to Aurora? I know that's been a big piece of your of your strategy, and how that impacts the city today and how it will continue to in the future.
Absolutely, Joe. And, that's a very interesting question. I mean, one of the things that we did at the city of Aurora in trying to make it more attractive for businesses, we focused on basically making the city of Aurora kind of a test bed or an incubation lab, but, not in the traditional sense of just, creating an innovation just like in a small area, but we've made the entire city an innovation district. And we've coined it the 605 Innovation District. 605, why? Because it's the first three prefixes of the zip code. We have 5 zip codes in the city of Aurora, right? And the city of Aurora sits in 4 counties as well, which is very unique. So we just said, why don't we just make the entire city the innovation district, and let's not limit ourselves, right? Because one of the main drivers was because of our fiber optic network that sits under the ground. We have a 45 a mile ring that goes around the city and about 50 miles of laterals that basically extend off of it. So the city's lit up like a Christmas tree, right? And that's pretty attractive to a lot of business, especially a lot of tech companies, and also small, medium, large, but more importantly, entrepreneurs, the small startup companies, because they're trying to find a place where they can go and test their products and services, right? And that 605 Innovation District, it just creates a hub, of innovation, right? We have the hub, which sits downtown Aurora, but there's different spokes throughout the city. And we look at basically how we can ignite growth here in the city of Aurora by attracting those different companies. And some of the things that we're doing is we basically laid out what we call it the 1,000 Jobs Initiative, right? That global startup initiative focuses on giving incentives to different businesses, whether it's access to different new market tax credits, whether it's giving discounts in terms of internet access with the fiber, if it has marketing, relocation reimbursements, performance-based grants. So all these different things are very attractive when you're an entrepreneur or startup and you're trying to grow your business, but as well, the larger companies as well. One of the larger companies that we've attracted out of many here is the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Many people don't know the Chicago Mercantile Exchange for the Chicago Stock Exchange sits right here in the city of Aurora. Why? Because of our assets. One, because of the location off of the I-88 corridor, which is our technology corridor hub. 2, because of the fiber, the fiber optic network, right? We're talking about high frequency trading, right? We got towers. It goes right back downtown to Chicago to the Equinix data center, which is the telecom hub for the Midwest. Everything comes in and out of the Equinix data center, right? Also, it sits right next to ComEd power stations. You need power for data centers, right? You need fiber. We have they have access to I'm going to say cheap land compared to Chicago, right? And also we have a mayor with a vision that is next to none, and that's how we're attracting these businesses, right? We're partnering with them, said, here's our infrastructure, here's our asset. How can we partner together to increase the GDP and the economic development for these different businesses, right? And that's just one, case study. And there's a lot more, right? And we just continue to grow.
Right. So that collaboration is really interesting, I think, Michael. And Peggy, I know collaboration between the university and the citizens, that idea of sort of community readiness for smart cities, is central to your mission. Can you, at least I think it is, can you talk a little bit about that education process and where the University of Wisconsin-Parkside fits into that equation?
It absolutely is central to our mission, and I think it's central to a lot of, especially regional universities who have a strong tie with the community and have a commitment to increasing citizen well-being, not just for education, but economic development and just basically quality of life. I think the university actually brings a unique voice to these sorts of partnerships. I would say, even though I know I've got 2 government folks here with me, I'd say that it's not uncommon for governments to respond to community needs in ways that might favor some groups over others. And that might not be not intentional, but the fact is that some groups have louder voices than others. Some groups are more attuned to what's going on. And I think that the university can help transform that P3 relationship to what is a new term for this, and I say it just because I love acronyms, is a CBP3, which is a community-based public-private partnership. And these partnerships, which include the community, are much longer term than we might normally be thinking of, especially in our classic transportation P3s. They're flexible enough to adapt to economic and community changes with community input. And one of their objectives typically is equitable outcomes that are available for everyone. Maybe not at the same time, but over the long run. Many of these early CBP3s emphasize green infrastructure or environmental challenges, such as water usage and water provision. So as I said, universities, especially our regional campuses, have the ability to connect community stakeholders to the partnerships throughout the entire process. And I'll give you an example. At UW-Parkside, we're located smack in the middle of two mid-sized communities and a number of smaller municipalities. We can serve, and we do serve, as a convener, as a mediator, as a connection for all parties. And the advantage to having this third agent is that we have a foot in both private and public spaces and a commitment to social equity, as well as the economic development that would increase well-being. So it's sort of, I suppose you could call it a middleman. And many times middlemen actually do work in P3s. Often they are regional development corporations, for instance, that have both a business and a community interest. The university can provide that function.
Thanks so much. Very, very important. I've got one more question, and it's my last one. And if we could, let's dream a little bit about Racine, Aurora, and smart cities everywhere in 2030 and beyond.
Well, I took you seriously on this, and I want to warn people that by birth, I'm actually a political scientist. So that's naturally where my dream goes to. And so I decided to just mention that I think civic technology can be a game changer, especially in involving the community more directly and more immediately into all decision-making processes, not just P3. With increased transparency and the ability to provide input, the community can become a creator of services and development projects rather than solely a consumer. So we have the ability with IoT not only to get information, but the technology to actually have people participate on a flatter platform in decision making that circumvents the boundaries of, physical town halls and so on. They're not only impactful in terms of efficiency. I believe that they have the ability to transform the entire political system in a way that will make participation more transparent and more equitable. An example of this is in Chicago, although it's a large city, and I said I wasn't going to mention large cities. There's a group called the City Tech Collaborative, which is a nonprofit organization, and it's specifically designed to increase access and input for citizen engagement. And so this is a way in which people can have feedback, not just on the finished product, but on the creation of services and on the input that tells them what it is that they are going to find to be most important for them. One of the things that UW-Parkside is doing in this area is that not only we have a certificate in smart city policy and civic partnerships, but we're also, and Will is helping us with this, is that we're working on a smart city U for government officials that will show people what sorts of platforms are most effective for engaging citizens. We also have a private sector focus on developing a smart workforce for the future. So our Center for Research and Innovation in Smart Cities is actually been designed specifically to provide that pivotal relationship that might be necessary for participation. So that's my dream.
Fascinating, and it's a great one. Will, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts around smart cities 10 years out, let's say.
I will say that the same way that roads, rails, and ports really supported the economic explosion of the Industrial Revolution, I believe that digital infrastructure will allow for the transformation to smarter cities and the community-wide connectivity that will be necessary to democratize innovation, opportunity, and hope. So many people have had to move to cities for opportunity. The more that we're able to actually support people where they're at through high speed, low latency connectivity, is going to allow people, whether you're on a tribal reservation, a rural town, a small city, or a metropolis, the ability to be able to connect, to collaborate, and to contribute no matter where you are. And I think that truly will be the democratization of innovation.
Yeah, interesting. And Michael, there's still some dreams left out there. So what do you have for us when you think about the next 10 years?
Yeah, I know my mayor keeps telling me to wake up, because I think I'm always dreaming, right? But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Peggy and Will. I think, and with this public-private partnership, the whole objective is to make it where you can develop, finance, and put in place long-term sustainable solutions that focus on public infrastructure, whether it's mobility, energy, transportation, and social infrastructure, right? And one of the things that we're looking at as part of our public-private partnership with the funders and the investment firms are what they're called these independent investment benefit corporations, right? Where while their objective is still to generate revenue, but they have a social responsibility with regards to generating, that additional revenue as well. So it's not solely ROI from a monetary perspective, but it's the social impact, right? So that's important for us, partnering with that right investment firm, right? Because once we have that in place, they can help us with those models to kind of manage this infrastructure over time, right? Going back to another point we talked about is access, right? We always talk about, I believe that technology is that common denominator for local and global growth, right? The same way that city provide water, electricity, and gas, fiber optic connectivity is that fourth utility. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity, right? And, there's been the cases where we have Chattanooga or Fort Collins, where we need to get that access to the people that really need it, right? And if COVID has proven one thing to us, because I believe it was basically an experimental, it wasn't an experiment, it was a real life use case to say why we need fiber optic to the home for every family, for all the 64,000 residents that we have at an affordable price, right? So they can have access to city services, so they can have access to education. And that's when we start to close the digital divide, right? So putting these models in place with the private side, with governance and government, and being smart about our governance and putting policies in place that basically bring all these different pieces together, that's going to be the wave of the future, because we have to make it for 30 to 40 and even 50 years to make this work. We can't look at these projects in the time frame of like 1 year. It just doesn't do any good. We can't get the return on an investment back, within that amount of time. We have to stretch it out. We need to amortize it over the 30 years, where we take the burden of the budgets and the costs off our citizens, right? And we start to look at generating new ways to bring revenue to the city, right? Because if there's one thing that government has, it's convening power. The mayor can snap his fingers in a minute and get everybody in the room that he would possibly need to get something done, right? And we need to be looking at leveraging that. So that smart city, of tomorrow, we need to make our plans future-proof. We need to be smart about it. We need to make them sustainable, and we need to get the right people around the table, private, public, the educations, the people, the citizens, and bring everybody into it, looking at it from an interdisciplinary perspective and putting a plan in place. It's not going to be perfect, but getting that plan in place and moving it forward.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you all. Really, really great insights from a couple of chief information officers of cities and a dean from the College of Social Sciences and Professional Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Parkside. So thank you, Peggy, thank you, Will, and thank you, Michael, for your time today.